Hey guys, tonight we drift deep into the candlelit corridors of the past, where your bed is a straw-filled sack, your pillows a folded robe, and your alarm clock. It's literally on fire. Welcome to the strangely cozy world of medieval monks, where time was sacred, sleep was rationed, and waking up on time might require a melting candle and a metal pin to the face. You're wrapped in a coarse woolen robe, the kind that scratches even when you lie perfectly still. It's cold, colder than it needs to be, because heating is for sinners or rich nobles, not men of God. The stone beneath your bare feet is unforgiving. Your breath fogs gently in the moonlight slipping through the slats of a high window. Somewhere out there, the world stumbles through plague and war, but in here, within these thick monastery walls, there is only silence. And the ticking of time. But not a clock. Not yet. There is no soothing tick-tock. No glowing digital face. There's barely a sundial. What keeps you in rhythm is the rule, capital R, and the flickering wax that's slowly measuring out your sleep. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is, especially if you're doing this at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge softly through the cloister, sandals slapping just slightly against the stone. The other monks are already filing silently into the chapel, robes rustling like dry leaves. It's time for Compline, the final prayer of the day, unless you're unlucky enough to be on night watch, in which case matins will steal you from bed around midnight. You're hoping you're not on the list tonight. This monastery was built centuries ago, and it smells like it, damp stone, beeswax, mildew, and incense that never quite fades. A torch hisses as you pass. Its flame bows slightly in the draught, casting a shadow that dances across a mural of Saint Benedict frowning sternly at you, as if he suspects you're thinking about sleeping in. You are. That's the thing, sleep is not your own here. Time is not your own. Even your thoughts are on borrowed hours. The monastic life is beautiful, yes, in that old, poetic way people now post on Pinterest boards. But you, here, in this cold skin of time, realize something else, it's exhausting. Everything you do, from scraping carrots in the garden to reciting psalms in the dead of night, happens according to a divine schedule, a celestial Google calendar from the year 529. And you better not be late. Back then, monks weren't just holy men, they were walking, chanting clocks. Each prayer, each chant, each silence marked the passing of time. They didn't tell time for convenience. They lived it. And yet, there was a problem. A deeply human, universal problem. The problem of sleep. More precisely, the problem of oversleeping. You've done it. Everyone's done it. But in the 9th century, there's no snooze button. If you miss matins, you miss God's hour. That's kind of a big deal when your job title is servant of the Lord. So what do you do when your soul depends on waking up in the dark without an alarm clock? You try bells. Big ones. But they need someone to ring them, and that someone needs to be awake first. So you get clever. You assign a monk to wake up others, but what if he snoozes too? You've now got the blind leading the blind into an unholy lie-in. So monks get creative. Some sleep lightly, hoping the divine will nudge them. Some rely on internal body clocks trained through sheer repetition. Others just hope the rooster gets it right. But a few start looking at candles. Not for prayer. Not for reading. But for waking. You pass the small workroom where Brother Anselm is already fiddling with a stubby candle. He's squinting, tongue stuck out like a toddler concentrating on a drawing, carefully inserting a thin metal pin sideways into the wax. It looks absurd. It is absurd. But it works, sometimes. The candle clock is born not out of genius, but of desperation. The idea is charmingly chaotic. As the candle burns down, the pin drops, either clanging into a metal dish, tugging a thread to ring a bell, or, more terrifyingly, landing directly on your face if you sleep too close. Historians still argue whether these candle clocks were a standard tool or just the eccentric tinkerings of monks like Anselm. Some claim they were widespread across monasteries. Others believe they were rare, half-baked ideas scribbled in the margins of dusty manuscripts. Either way, the image is irresistible: a monk, half asleep, surrounded by wax dribbles and prayer scrolls, trusting a flame not to kill him in his sleep. And trust me, it's not just about timing. It's also about symbolism. Fire, in monastic thought, is sacred. It purifies, it illuminates, it measures divine time without the vanity of gears and hands. You don't look at the flame, you feel its passage. Still, it's hard not to imagine a few very singed eyebrows along the way. You finally reach your tiny cell, a room so small you can touch all four walls if you stretch, and curl under your itchy blanket. Somewhere in the hall, a bell rings faintly, maybe a signal from another candle pin falling into a pan. Someone's on duty. You exhale. And then, in that quiet moment, the wax begins to melt. Not just on your bedside candle, but through time. Through centuries. One drip at a time, shaping an invisible alarm, measuring moments so delicately that modern clocks would blush. You're not asleep yet. Not quite. But you're starting to feel it, that soft pull between now and never. That warmth that comes not from fire, but from knowing you're exactly where you need to be. In a cold cell. Wrapped in scratchy wool. Listening for pins to fall. The bell's echo hasn't even faded before you're back on your feet, eyes still crusted with sleep, moving almost by muscle memory. This is obedience. This is the rule of Benedict, capital R, like it's some sort of sacred user manual, and in many ways, it is. You're not just following a routine. You are the routine. The rule, written by Saint Benedict in the 6th century, governs everything in the monastery. It's not a suggestion. It's divine scheduling, with spiritual consequences. Wake, pray, eat, labor, pray, sleep. Repeat until further notice from heaven. And at the heart of this structure, timekeeping. Not for productivity, like a 21st century planner. No. Here, time equals discipline. Discipline equals holiness. And you? You're trying not to sneeze in the chapel because God and 36 other monks are listening. You shuffle toward the choir stalls for matins, the early morning prayer that doesn't so much begin the day as interrupt it. It's still pitch black outside. Your candle barely lights the space in front of you. The cold bites at your ankles, and the stone beneath your sandals may as well be ice. But you're not thinking about comfort. You're thinking about whether you're going to stay awake through all 150 psalms this week. One by one, the brothers chant. You join in, your voice dry with sleep but steady, because even though your body begs to lie down, your soul's been trained like a Gregorian athlete. This is where obedience becomes muscle. You don't choose when to pray. The rule tells you. And if you start questioning the rule, well, you probably weren't monk material to begin with. It sounds harsh, maybe even robotic. But there's a strange peace in surrendering control. You don't worry about what to do next, it's all decided. Your job is to show up and chant, every time. Which brings us, inconveniently, back to the issue of actually waking up on time. Saint Benedict didn't offer a section on DIY alarm clocks, unfortunately. The rule expected that the monk on bell duty would rise before the scheduled hour, ready to rouse the rest. But monks are humans, tired, sometimes cranky, sometimes a bit too cozy in their robes. And one monk oversleeping meant the whole monastery started late. And if you start prayers late, are you disrespecting God? Historians still argue whether lateness was considered spiritual weakness or just bad luck. So what do the monks do? They adapt, naturally. Relying on themselves isn't enough, they start leaning into invention, awkwardly but earnestly. You remember Brother Anselm with his waxy science experiment. He's not alone. Across monasteries in England, France, and Germany, monks begin modifying the humble candle to help with their divine timekeeping. The rule doesn't forbid innovation. In fact, many monasteries become hotbeds of invention, not just in candle clocks, but in brewing, herbal medicine, and even early music notation. Obedience doesn't mean stagnation. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. For now, you're standing in the icy choir stall, trying not to sway as the chant drags on. The pinprick of candlelight trembles at the edge of your vision. Someone sneezes quietly. Another coughs. And yet, no one breaks formation. You wonder how they did this for decades. Some monks entered monasteries at age 14 and died within these walls. No vacations. No late mornings. Just a lifetime of waking in darkness and praying until dawn. Why? Because they believed time was sacred. Every second belonged to God. The rule didn't waste a moment. Even silence was scheduled. Even sleep had structure. Speaking of which, you've got about 4 hours before Lauds, the morning prayer. That's assuming you can fall asleep fast enough to squeeze in a nap before the next divine summons. You wonder if the candle clock will help, or just make things worse. Back in your cell, you watch the stubby candle flicker. A pin glimmers, wedged delicately into the wax near its midpoint. The plan is simple: as the candle burns, it reaches the pin, which then drops into a tin dish below with a plink. It's primitive. It's also kind of genius. Except when it fails. Which it does. Often. Sometimes the wax melts unevenly, and the pin gets stuck. Other times, the pin falls too early. Or the whole candle collapses and the wax floods like a tiny lava flow, silently consuming your dish and your dignity. Still, the monks persist. Why? Because relying on one person to wake up and wake everyone else feels like gambling with your salvation. Better to put your faith in fire. You finally crawl into your bed, really just a wooden plank with some hay and cloth. The candle's glow softens the room, turning the rough stone into something dreamlike. Your eyes begin to close. But right before you drift off, you have a thought: why not just sleep through matins? Would God really mind? And then you remember a story Brother Felix told you. A novice monk once overslept matins for 3 nights in a row. On the 4th night, his candle refused to light. No matter how many times he struck the flint, the wick stayed cold. Was it divine punishment? A miracle? Or maybe just damp wax? Historians still argue whether these tales were meant to scare young monks or simply dramatize the importance of discipline. Either way, you're not taking any chances. You blow out your thoughts. Let the candle do its job. And as your mind drifts, the rule hums beneath your ribs, a rhythm older than kingdoms. You're not just sleeping. You're resetting. So the chant can start again. So you can rise again. So the wax can burn again. And tomorrow? Tomorrow you'll do it all again. The pin drops with a faint tink, and you jolt upright, disoriented for a second. It's dark, still. You weren't in deep sleep, not really. Not in this place. Your body sleeps like a sentry, half listening to the world, tuned to the faintest metal-on-metal percussion of your makeshift alarm. Congratulations. You've survived another monastic nap without divine reprimand. You roll off your stiff wooden plank and splash your face with icy water from the clay basin. The shock hits your brain like a medieval espresso. You wonder, fleetingly, what it must be like to sleep through the night uninterrupted. Then you remember, that's not part of the gig. As you shuffle toward the chapel for lauds, the faintest pre-dawn glow peeks through the eastern slit windows. The timing is eerie. Precise. Almost, planned. And in a way, it is, though not by Apple or Google, but by monks wielding wax and discipline like engineers of divine rhythm. Now here's the odd part. These candle clocks, so fragile, so makeshift, somehow survive centuries. Not the actual wax, obviously. Wax isn't great at surviving the Middle Ages. But the idea does. In fact, several monastic manuals from the 10th to the 14th centuries include instructions for measuring time with candles, including one describing a candle exactly 12 inches high that burned evenly for 4 hours. Place metal markers at precise intervals, and voila, you've got a ticking time bomb of holiness. The real kicker. These weren't just makeshift gimmicks. Monks used candle clocks to regulate prayer, pace meditation, and structure chores. You might be assigned to rake the herb garden for 2 inches of candle. Imagine telling your boss you'll reply to emails for half a candle's worth. It's the kind of system that sounds laughably analog now, but in its time, revolutionary. The monks weren't just passively obeying the rule, they were hacking it. Silently. With wax. Historians still argue whether monks invented the candle clock or just perfected an older idea borrowed from other cultures. There are whispers, some credible, that ancient Chinese scholars used incense sticks with embedded weights for timekeeping, too. And in the Islamic Golden Age, water clocks and mechanical devices flourished centuries before Europe caught up. But in Europe, at least, it's clear who took time seriously: monks. Nobody else even cared to that degree. Kings might rise with the sun. Peasants followed their crops. Merchants cared about days, not minutes. But monks? Monks cared about hours. Even the invisible ones. You duck your head into the chapel again, nodding faintly at the stone saints, whose chipped eyes follow you like a security camera from the 1200s. The air is thick with incense. You kneel, and the chanting begins. You chant because it is lauds. You chant because the candle burned just enough. You chant because the rule said so. And because, honestly, your brain is too sleepy to object. But as your voice blends with the others, monotone but oddly beautiful, you realize something. This isn't just scheduling. This is community engineering. No one monk controls the time, and yet all of you live by it. It's a clock made of people and wax and rules and faith. The candle clock's brilliance isn't that it wakes you up. It's that it equalizes you. Every monk, from the lowliest novice to the grumpiest abbot, is governed by the same drip of wax. No favorites. No skipping ahead. Just time, melting in a straight line. You remember Brother Hugo, the old monk with a limp who swears the candle once saved his life. He tells the story during meals sometimes, even though talking is technically discouraged. He was on the verge of collapsing from exhaustion during a brutal Lent fast. Fell asleep sitting up. But the candle dropped a pin, startled him awake, and got him to prayers just in time to avoid a disciplinary penance. It's hard to know if these stories are real or embroidered with centuries of repetition. Historians still argue whether monks exaggerated the miracles of their inventions to impress visiting bishops or simply to entertain themselves. After all, when your hobbies are transcribing Bibles and growing leeks, you get creative. The abbey eventually develops a few variants of the candle clock. Some versions use threads instead of pins, lightweight string that, once burned through, releases a small suspended weight. Others experiment with scented candles, each fragrance marking a different hour. Imagine waking up to cinnamon and knowing it's time for Vespers. Medieval aromatherapy meets timekeeping. You, unfortunately, are still using the basic version. Metal pin. Small dish. One clumsy plink between you and eternal lateness. But hey, it beats depending on Brother Otto, who once slept through 3 bells and then claimed it was an act of divine silence. The abbot didn't buy it. Eventually, monasteries try more complex ideas. Water clocks. Sundials. Hourglasses. Some even start building mechanical clocks, though they're rare and clunky in these early stages, more furniture than function. And guess what? Monks are often the ones building those, too. Because when you pray 7 times a day, you become very, very motivated to stay on schedule. You finish lauds and trudge out to your assigned labor. Today, it's manuscript copying. You slide into the scriptorium, that silent room filled with scratchy quills, inkwells, and the ever-present smell of vellum. It's warmer in here. Quieter, too. You sit at your desk, squinting at the half-finished P in Psalms, and you glance at the nearby candle, thin, tall, unassuming. A tiny pin rests 3 inches from the flame. Your timer has begun. By the time it drops, you should have finished this page. Unless you fall asleep again. Your quill scratches slowly over the stretched calfskin, and the candle burns in the periphery like a slow, breathing metronome. Each flicker makes the pin tremble, as if it's nervous about its inevitable fall. And you? You're in a peculiar trance, somewhere between artistry and automation. Writing psalms from memory, not just copying words, but living them through your hand. The hours pass not by clocks, but by heat, scent, and wax. Every inch of candle means something. You learn to sense when a pin is near just by the smell of melting wax or the shape of the flame's shadow. There's something deeply human in this kind of timekeeping. It's not mechanical, not digital, but organic. Messy. Personal. Like your handwriting. That's probably why no 2 monks time things exactly the same way. Brother Peter insists his candles last precisely 1 hour. Brother Martin says his burn too fast unless he sings over them. Somehow, the vibrations help the wax behave. Historians still argue whether this was superstition or early science, or just monks being monks. You shake your hand out. It's cramping again. That's the downside of medieval calligraphy, your hand gets sore before your soul does. Across the room, someone sneezes. Someone else yawns. But the candles keep burning. Time moves forward, even when you want it to slow. The truth is, you're starting to develop a weird affection for these waxy little clocks. They don't just keep you on schedule, they protect you. From reprimands. From missed prayers. From your own drowsy nature. You've come to trust them more than you trust some of the brothers, if you're being honest. Take Brother Thomas. He swears he's never needed a candle clock. Claims he wakes up naturally, as the Holy Spirit wills it. And yet, somehow, he's always suspiciously late for the 2 a.m. matins during winter. You suspect divine intervention might be warmer than average in his cell. But even Thomas benefits from the candle. Because when you build your life around shared rhythms, individual sloppiness gets absorbed by the group. That's the secret of the monastery, not perfection, but consistency. And the candle, humble as it is, helps keep that beat. You pause your writing to dip the quill. The ink bottle is nearly empty again. Probably another task for the candle's timer later, refill the ink when the next pin drops. It's strange how quickly your life has become divided by wax. Eat when it's here. Pray when it's there. Work until it dings. In another time, you'd have called this a prison. Now, it's structure. Peace. Sleepy peace, but peace all the same. Still, your curiosity isn't totally numbed by ritual. You start to wonder where the candles come from, who makes them. You know the beeswax is local. The abbey has hives, and the beekeeper, Brother Luke, guards his colonies like they're sacred relics. He claims the wax made in spring burns differently than that made in autumn. Smoother flame. More even melt. You didn't believe him until last week, when your winter candle fizzled halfway down. Luke also says the candles remember. They burn with the memory of the sun, he murmured once while trimming a wick. It sounded mystical, but also, he might have been sleep-deprived. Hard to tell in this place. The monks who mold the candles work in the back corner of the kitchen, next to the bread ovens. It's always warm there, and the smell is oddly comforting, a blend of beeswax, baking loaves, and smoky wood. You visit one afternoon, under the guise of inventory duty, just to watch. The process is mesmerizing. Wax is melted in great iron pots, then poured into long wooden molds around thick cotton wicks. To insert the pins, the monk uses a hot needle to pierce a tiny hole, then carefully balances the metal sliver in just the right spot. One wrong move and the pin falls early, or worse, not at all. And you realize, this isn't just a job. It's an art. A sacred, sleepy art designed to ensure that dozens of other tired monks remember to wake up and worship on time. There's something poetic about it, setting a flame to burn slowly toward your future obligations. Letting fire decide your schedule. Like trusting a match to hold your fate. You think about how different this is from the outside world. Out there, people follow the sun. Or their stomachs. Or the cries of their children. In here, you follow wax. A carefully measured, slowly melting spine of structure. It's almost funny. Your stomach grumbles, right on cue. The candle's pin drops with a soft plink, and you close your manuscript. That sound, so small, carries authority. You don't question it. You obey. It's dinner time. The refectory is dim, lit by, you guessed it, candles. You file in, silent as always, and take your seat. One monk reads aloud from a hagiography about some saint who tamed a wolf. You spoon bland stew into your mouth and try to imagine convincing a wolf to behave without treats. Good luck with that, Saint Francis. The candle on your table has a pin, too. Not for waking this time, but for ending the meal. No one eats past the drop. You've gotten used to eating at candle speed, quickly, quietly, and without complaint. Even when it's lentils again. Which it is. Again. You look around at the faces of your brothers, dimly illuminated by flickering light. Some look serene. Others look like they could nap right into their bowls. But all of them are here, present, obeying the rhythm. The candle isn't flashy. It's not loud. But it's effective. And maybe that's the lesson. Time doesn't have to shout to matter. It just has to burn. You wake to the sound of another pin dropping. This one's a little heavier, probably made from a reused scrap of old bell clapper. You've learned to tell the difference between the tones. A thin pin rings like a coin tossed on marble. A fat one thuds like a reluctant monk falling into morning prayer. You stretch, your joints cracking faintly in the silence. Your muscles ache, but it's a quiet ache, familiar, almost reassuring. Like your body is confirming you still exist. Still here. Still bound to the daily burn of the candle. This time, the pin wasn't set for matins or lauds. It was for your personal hour of meditation. The rule of Saint Benedict allows for these rare windows of silent contemplation, a time between duties where you can just think. Or sleep. But you're feeling curious this morning, maybe even ambitious. So you walk to the library. It's not a big library, but it smells like one, dry parchment, dusty leather, beeswax polish. The only sound is the wind through the narrow windows and the whisper of candlelight along the wooden beams. You settle near the section where the older texts live. Ancient copies of church councils, hand-transcribed scriptures, strange diagrams no one quite understands. And tucked behind a brittle copy of De Natura Rerum, you find it, the monastery's old timekeeping ledger. It's bound in calfskin and heavy with marginalia, notes scribbled by generations of monks who, like you, wondered about the mysteries of candle clocks. One page in particular catches your eye. It's a diagram of a multi-pin candle clock used during Holy Week, designed to release different bells at different intervals. Like a symphony of wax and wire. And here's the kicker, the candle is divided into 7 zones, each representing a moment of Christ's Passion, with pins labeled Gethsemane, scourging, crown, carrying, crucifixion, darkness, and finally, silence. You stare at it for a long time. Not because it's ornate, though it is, but because of what it represents. These monks weren't just using time to track devotion. They were turning time into prayer. Into memory. into ritual. Historians still argue whether these symbolic candle clocks were ever widely used, or if they were more like performance art, experimental expressions of piety reserved for special days. But here it is, in your hands, its edges singed just slightly with age. Real. You flip to the next page. This one's more technical. It details how to calculate burn rates based on the thickness of the wick, the purity of the wax, and even the ambient temperature. Apparently, colder air slows the melt. Thicker wicks produce more soot but also faster drops. It's like reading a medieval physics textbook. One scribble in the margin reads, "Wick too fat, flame danced and ruined vespers." You chuckle. Even in the 12th century, people were blaming technology for being late. And here's a fun tidbit you didn't expect. At one point, the monastery experimented with dual-wick candles, where two flames would race each other down the wax. The faster one indicated the correct time, and the loser was shaved or adjusted until it complied. Candle correction. Primitive QA testing. You've gotta respect the hustle. Of course, not every monk was a fan of this obsession with precision. There's a short sermon tucked into the back of the ledger, anonymous, and signed. It warns against idolatry of flame and cautions that, in striving to master time, we may lose eternity. Poetic. Dramatic. Probably Brother Philip, you guess. He has a flair for the theatrical and once refused to use candles for a month, claiming they distracted him from inner light. He tripped on a stair and broke his toe. Inner light didn't help much then. Still, you get the point. There's a danger in overmeasuring. In watching the clock so closely you forget to live. Or pray. Or breathe. You put the book away gently and step back outside, where the sun is just beginning to pierce the mist above the cloister garden. Dew sparkles on the cabbage leaves. A lone bird sings, a sleepy, confused note like it also just woke up too early. You sit on a bench near the herb beds, letting your thoughts wander. The candle system is brilliant, yes. But it's not just about discipline. It's about transformation. Monks came here to be reshaped, to carve away distraction and build a rhythm strong enough to hold a life. And that rhythm? It's measured in melted wax. You imagine someone from the outside stumbling into this world. A merchant, maybe, used to coins and contracts. Or a nobleman who keeps time by feasts and favors. What would they think of your candle clock? Probably nothing. They'd laugh. Or dismiss it as primitive. Maybe they'd say, just look at the sun, as if sunlight obeys chapel bells. But they wouldn't feel the rhythm. The intimacy. The comfort of a world where the future is as certain as the next drop of melted wax. They wouldn't know that a single candle can shape your soul. Back in the scriptorium, you light another one. You've got a page of Genesis waiting. And you time your work to the burn, not because you must, but because it keeps you grounded. It's like writing with a heartbeat. One drop, one breath, one line at a time. Someone sneezes again. Probably Brother Martin. He always sneezes when he's near frankincense. Or sunlight. Or maybe both. You glance at his candle and see the pin shaking, just barely. Any moment now. Tick. Tick. Plink. He flinches. Then looks at you and grins sheepishly. Right on time. The bells have faded, but the candle's glow still lingers, like a lazy firefly trapped inside a glass jar. You trudge back to your cell, tired, knowing your next task waits in the dim light, a stroll through the monastery's lesser-known history, the invention of the alarum candle, the medieval answer to the annoying beep of a modern alarm clock. You probably think alarm clocks are a modern convenience born of smartphones and sleep studies. But no. The earliest recorded alarm clocks were these humble candles with pins designed to wake monks for night prayers, those unholy hours when everyone's eyelids threatened to betray them. It all started with a frustrating problem: how to keep the night office on time when your body insists on sleeping. The monks couldn't rely on roosters, they weren't always reliable, especially in the dark and cold of early spring. Town criers weren't exactly punctual either. So the monastery needed a fireproof timekeeper that wouldn't sleep, wouldn't talk back, and wouldn't throw fits when the nights got long. Cue the alarum candle. You learn that these candles had specially placed pins that, when dropped, hit a metal plate or bowl to make a noise loud enough to wake a slumbering monk, or, in some cases, a whole dormitory. They were the medieval beep beep beep, but a bit more poetic. Historians still argue whether these early alarms were used regularly or just on rare feast days. Some argue the noise was more ceremonial than practical, more about stirring the soul than waking the flesh. But when you think about it, waking up in the cold stone dormitory without a loud clang might have been impossible. You wonder what it must have felt like to be roused by a sudden plink in the dead of night. Maybe startling, maybe annoying. Probably both. One account, penned by a slightly cranky monk named Brother Anselm, describes a night when the candle's pin fell too early, startling half the abbey awake at midnight instead of the appointed 2 a.m. matins. "I swear I saw Brother Hugo snore louder in protest," Anselm wrote dryly. The ingenious bit is that these candles weren't just about sound. They were about ritualizing wakefulness, turning the harshness of the night into a structured experience. The monks accepted this forced awakening as part of their spiritual discipline. It was less alarm clock and more call to prayer. There's a fringe theory that some monasteries experimented with scents released at these intervals, burning herbs like rosemary or lavender to gently nudge sleepers awake. Imagine that, a medieval aromatherapy alarm clock. You chuckle to yourself. It sounds so modern, and yet here it is, centuries ago. But no, you remind yourself, this wasn't a luxury. These candles were practical tools forged from necessity. They had to be reliable, easy to make, and loud enough to rouse the sleepiest brother. You wander down to the workshop where these alarum candles were crafted. It's a cluttered nook, filled with scraps of metal, old nails, and bits of wax. The candle molds sit on a rough bench, alongside handmade tongs and beeswax blocks. You watch the smith carefully insert a tiny brass pin into a candle's side. The pin is balanced perfectly over a small iron bowl. The idea is simple: as the candle burns down, the pin loosens and drops, ringing the bowl below. This is medieval precision engineering at its finest: no gears, no springs, just gravity and wax. You marvel at the elegance. It's almost poetic, this slow drip of time measured by molten beeswax and metal strikes. Later, you ask the smith why the pins sometimes vary in size or shape. He shrugs, some like a sharp clang. Others a soft chime. Depends on who's waking up. You imagine Brother Thomas again, the one who claims divine guidance for waking, probably favoring a gentler sound. Then the smith laughs and adds, "Sometimes we use old bells from broken clocks. Keeps the tradition alive." It strikes you how much care goes into something so mundane. And how, despite the centuries, the desire to tame sleep and measure time hasn't changed much. You think about your own sleep struggles. The nights when the candle's last glow fades but your eyes won't close. The mornings when the pin drops and you jolt awake, heart pounding, trying to catch the rhythm of the day. This candle alarm is a tiny bridge between ancient monks and you, two sleep-deprived souls connected by melted wax and measured sound. The chapel bells toll faintly in the distance, and you feel a deep respect for these sleepy inventors. Their candle clocks weren't just timekeepers, they were guardians of order in the chaos of night. You close your eyes briefly, imagining the dim dormitory, the soft plink of a pin dropping, the groggy rustle of brothers waking one by one. It's not the beep of a phone, but it gets the job done. You stretch again, a yawn escaping. Tomorrow, you think, you might try building one of these candle alarms yourself. Maybe with a bit of modern twist. No bells, just a tiny buzzer hidden in the wax. A medieval meets modern bedtime experiment. The wax burns slowly, as always. Time passes and drops, and you can't help but feel that, no matter how much the world changes, some rhythms stay with us forever. The candle burns low now, flickering shadows dancing on the stone walls as you wander toward the refectory, the place where monks gather to eat in silence. The smell of stale bread and watered-down ale lingers faintly, reminders that even the most disciplined souls need nourishment, even if it's bland and repetitive. But tonight, your mind isn't on the meal. It's on the curious connection between candle clocks and the monastic day's strict rhythm. You realize that these candles did more than just mark time, they sculpted the very flow of daily life, breaking it into sacred segments and punctuating it with ritual. Think about it, from waking at matins, through the long hours of work and prayer, to Compline at dusk, everything followed a precise schedule. And since mechanical clocks hadn't yet fully taken hold, these candles, melting slowly, pin by pin, were the monks' most reliable companions. There's a story you recall about the Abbey of Saint-Germain-des-Prés in Paris. It's said that in the 12th century, monks there used candles calibrated so exactly that they could mark hours and even half hours, a rudimentary division of the day. They burned in deep, carved molds, ensuring an even drip rate. It was a painstaking craft. Historians still argue whether these candles were truly accurate timekeepers or more symbolic markers. After all, ambient temperature, wax quality, and wick length all influenced burn rate, often unpredictably. The monks had to balance faith in their tools with acceptance of their imperfection. You imagine the scribe copying the day's prayer schedule by candlelight, the soft glow casting shifting shadows on vellum. The candle itself becomes a metronome for sacred life, its steady melting a tactile heartbeat beneath the spiritual hustle. But there's a quirky twist. Some monasteries reportedly used colored candles to mark different times or moods. Red for fiery zeal, green for contemplative calm, even purple for penitence. Each candle was chosen not just for its burn time but for its symbolic meaning. Talk about multitasking. In one dusty manuscript, you find a curious note about candle envy, monks gossiping about whose candles burned slowest, considered a sign of divine favor or better craftsmanship. One monk allegedly sabotaged another's candle by dipping the wick in salt water, hoping to speed the burn and win favor. Imagine the scandal. You chuckle. Even in a cloister, human nature and competition sneak through the cracks like stray candle smoke. But the candle clock's charm isn't just in utility or rivalry, it's in the ritual of waiting, watching, and surrendering to time's flow. Each melted inch a reminder that life is fleeting, patience is sacred, and sometimes, you have to sit with the slow drip of moments passing. This idea resonates deeply. In a world rushing toward instant everything, these monks embraced slow, tangible time. They surrendered to wax and wick, let the candle's flame dictate their rhythm instead of the other way around. Walking back through the cloister, the night air crisp against your skin, you notice how the flickering lights echo this philosophy. Not digital beeps or flashing numbers, but gentle, imperfect glow. You think about how this slow time might have influenced the monk's mindset. How waiting for the candle's pin to drop teaches you to accept uncertainty, to find comfort in steady progress rather than frantic hurry. As you return to your cell, you pause to light another candle, your fingers steady despite the growing fatigue. You let the wax pool at its base, watching it drip in quiet pools like liquid gold. And you remember a line from the Rule of Saint Benedict: prefer nothing to the love of Christ, and to him, hold fast, whatever it may cost you. You think about how these candles, tools, symbols, companions, helped the monks hold fast, shaping their days and nights with light and shadow. You settle in, your eyelids heavy but your mind quietly humming with these ancient rhythms. The candle burns down slowly, and so do you. Your footsteps echo softly as you wander toward the workshop again, curiosity pulling you like a gentle tug at the hem of a robe. The candle maker's tools glisten faintly in the low light, their wooden molds, iron tongs, and delicate pins all lined up like soldiers ready for the next wax battle. You watch as the master craftsman dips a wick into molten beeswax, layering it until it's just thick enough to hold a steady flame. It's a slow, repetitive dance, dip, dry, each movement precise, almost meditative. This process has barely changed since medieval times, though you wouldn't be surprised if today's artisans hummed the same Gregorian chants. There's something comforting about the repetition, the slow building of a candle, layer by layer, much like the slow building of your own understanding of these ancient devices. You notice a small box filled with tiny pins, some sharp as needles, others blunt and rounded. These pins are the heart of the candle clock's magic, the mechanism that turns time into sound. You wonder if the monks ever experimented with different metals for these pins. Would copper produce a softer chime? Would iron ring louder? Historians still argue whether the monks developed precise standards for pin placement or if it was more of an art, guided by trial and error. The lack of surviving technical manuals suggests a lot was learned by doing, passing knowledge down through whispered instruction in cold workshops. The craftsman carefully inserts a pin into a candle's side, angling it just so, balancing it so that as the wax melts, gravity will do its work. One false move and the pin might fall too soon or too late, disrupting the rhythm of prayer and work. You chuckle to yourself imagining a clumsy apprentice whose pins keep dropping prematurely, causing chaos in the monastery's schedule. Sorry, Father Abbot, my candle ran away with me. The candle clock is a delicate balance of physics and faith. Its design reflects an understanding of burn rates, heat transfer, and material behavior, impressive, considering the limited scientific knowledge of the time. There's a delightful quirk you discover. Some monks reportedly added a drop of resin or herbs near the pins to produce a subtle scent when the pin fell, adding an olfactory dimension to the alert. Imagine waking not just to a clang, but to the faint aroma of rosemary or frankincense. This blend of sensory cues would have made waking more pleasant, or at least less jarring, an early form of mindfulness, centuries before the term existed. As the candle burns lower, you reflect on the paradox of this invention. It's at once simple and complex, mechanical and spiritual, practical and poetic. The monks weren't just fighting sleep, they were crafting a tool that embodied their relationship with time, discipline, and devotion. You look around the workshop, feeling a quiet kinship with these artisans of light and shadow. Their work flickers on through the centuries, a reminder that even the smallest innovations can leave a lasting glow. You blow out the candle gently, the smoke curling upward like a whispered prayer, and step back into the cool night air, ready to let the rhythms of melted wax carry you toward rest. The monastery's stone corridors are hushed now, the only sound the soft tapping of your footsteps on worn flagstones. The candle's faint glow has faded from your hand, but the image lingers, a flickering testament to human ingenuity and devotion. You think about how this slow-burning technology fits into the broader story of medieval timekeeping. For centuries, sundials, water clocks, and mechanical devices competed for the crown of accuracy. Yet in the cloister's quiet, the candle clock held a special place, a humble, portable, and surprisingly effective way to measure passing hours, especially in the absence of sunlight. There's a fascinating historical tidbit you recall. In 10th century Japan, monks used a similar candle system called tokidoke, or time-telling candle. These were marked with intervals and occasionally scented with herbs, much like their European cousins. It's a reminder that the human desire to measure and master time is universal. Historians still argue whether the European alarum candle directly inspired these Asian versions or if they developed independently. The parallels are striking, though, perhaps a case of simultaneous invention spurred by shared monastic needs. Back in Europe, the candle clock was part of a larger effort to regulate monastic life with increasing precision. The rule of Saint Benedict emphasized order and punctuality, but before clocks, monks relied on these ingenious but imperfect tools. Interestingly, the candle's limitations shaped the monastic schedule itself. Since wax melted at varying speeds depending on humidity and temperature, monks often built in a margin of error, making prayer times flexible within certain bounds. It wasn't the relentless precision we expect today but a gentle, adaptable rhythm. You imagine the monks' daily lives flowing with this imperfect yet comforting pulse, an echo of natural cycles rather than the cold tick of gears. You also remember reading about candle clocks used outside monasteries. Some medieval households employed simpler versions to track cooking times or signal curfew. In one curious case, a 13th-century English manor used candles with pins to alert guards to patrol changes. The alarum candle was an early security system. It's remarkable to think that what started as a spiritual aid became a practical tool for everyday life. You chuckle at the thought of a nobleman startled awake by a pin dropping in the dead of night. Perhaps not as pious as the monks, but certainly just as human. There's an open scholarly debate on whether the candle clock influenced the development of mechanical clocks. Some argue that the desire to improve timekeeping in monastic contexts spurred early clockmakers to innovate, moving from wax to gears. Others suggest mechanical clocks emerged independently, inspired more by astronomy and civic needs than candles. Either way, the candle clock remains a fascinating footnote, a bridge between natural, slow time and the mechanized precision that defines modern life. As you walk through the cloister's arches, the night air feels cooler, the ancient stones whispering secrets of hours counted in melting wax and quiet clangs. You feel a strange comfort in this imperfect, flickering time, a reminder that time itself is less about exactness and more about rhythm and ritual. You pause to gaze at a faint star, wondering if the monks looked up as often, measuring the heavens alongside their candles. The world has changed, but these small moments of waiting, watching, and waking remain universal. You trace your fingers along the rough stone walls as you wander deeper into the abbey, the memory of candle flames dancing in your mind. Now, your thoughts turn to the curious people behind the candle clocks, the monks themselves. They weren't just passive users, they were inventors, tinkerers, and sometimes even pranksters. Take Brother Edric, for instance, a name that pops up in various dusty chronicles. He was known for his experiments with candle design, often trying to improve burn time by adding animal fats or blending different types of wax. His notebooks, fragmented though they are, reveal a mind curious about materials, physics, and even chemistry, long before those disciplines existed as formal sciences. But Edric's curiosity sometimes got him into trouble. One story tells of a candle that burned too fast, triggering an early alarm that sent the whole monastery into a confused frenzy. Some monks thought it was a divine warning, others suspected Brother Edric's meddling. Historians still argue whether Edric's experiments were part of a larger tradition of monastic innovation or isolated attempts at improvement. Some scholars paint him as a pioneer, others as a meddlesome hobbyist whose candles were more trouble than help. You smile, picturing Edric in his dim cell, mixing waxes and debating whether adding pine resin would help or hinder the candle's reliability. A man wrestling with fire, time, and faith all at once. There's also an amusing fringe tale about a candle duel between two monks. They supposedly raced candles side by side to see whose would burn longest, wagering sips of watered wine. The contest ended when both candles burned too low and set the altar cloth smoldering, much to the abbot's dismay. You appreciate the human side of these stories, the blend of science, superstition, competition, and camaraderie. The monks weren't saints of unchanging discipline, they were people prone to mistakes, jokes, and even boredom. In fact, some scholars suggest that candle clocks might have helped stave off boredom during long night vigils. Watching the wax drip, waiting for the pin to drop, offered a kind of quiet entertainment. The anticipation of the clang was a small thrill in an otherwise austere existence. You imagine yourself sitting among them, eyes heavy but mind alert, counting seconds as the wax melts, waiting for that little pin to fall and rattle its bell. This connection across time, the shared experience of waiting, of marking moments with sound and light, feels comforting, almost like an ancient lullaby. And then there's the broader impact of these candle clocks. Their design and use influenced other monastic inventions, from water clocks to early mechanical escapements. The monks were not just religious zealots but accidental engineers laying groundwork for centuries of horological progress. You realize the humble candle clock represents something bigger, the human urge to order life, to measure time in a way that gives meaning and structure, even amid darkness. As you settle down for the night, your thoughts flicker like the wax's flame, bright, warm, and ever melting forward. You rise quietly and make your way toward the abbey's small library, where the scent of aged parchment mingles with the faintest trace of melted wax. It's here, among manuscripts and marginalia, that the story of candle clocks takes on a new dimension, one woven from written words, scribbled notes, and illuminated diagrams. You pick up a worn codex, its leather cover cracked and softened by centuries of handling. Inside, you find a curious illustration, a candle, its surface dotted with tiny pins, each connected by thin lines to a small bell hanging beside it. The drawing is crude but clear, a blueprint for how these simple alarms worked. You realize monks not only used candle clocks but documented them, teaching future generations how to replicate this delicate craft. This passing down of knowledge, through text and tradition, helped preserve the candle clock's place in monastic life long after its invention. One fascinating historical fact, some manuscripts even include instructions on how to tune the bells attached to candle clocks, ensuring a pleasant tone rather than a harsh clang. The goal was to wake the sleeper gently, in keeping with the monastic vow of serenity. Yet, here's the quirky part. One text suggests monks experimented with different bell materials, bronze, iron, even bone, to achieve varying sounds. Bone bells supposedly produced a softer, more spiritual chime, though you can't help but wonder how often the softer bells were just quieter excuses for a nap. Scholars still debate the extent to which these writings influenced secular candle clock makers. Did the knowledge stay confined to monastic walls, or did it trickle into towns and castles, spreading the technology? The evidence is patchy, leaving room for spirited discussion. You close the codex gently, your fingers tracing the edges as you reflect on the importance of written knowledge. The monks weren't just inventors, they were preservers and transmitters of science and craft. This is a sharp contrast to the oral traditions of other cultures, where technology often passed by word of mouth. Here, ink and vellum safeguarded the candle clock's secrets. You wonder if some monks took pride in their craftsmanship beyond the purely functional, perhaps competing over whose candle clocks were most beautifully designed or precisely made. There's a legend of a young monk who inscribed tiny prayers into the wax of his candles, believing the flame would carry his petitions to heaven as it burned down. Whether fact or fanciful myth, it speaks to the deep spiritual connection between the monks and their timekeeping tools. You feel a wave of calm wash over you, the silent library a perfect place to contemplate how time, light, and devotion intertwined in the quiet glow of candle flame. As you set the codex back, the abbey's silence enfolds you, a gentle reminder that knowledge, like the wax, slowly melts away yet leaves a lasting impression. The library's hushed atmosphere lingers as you step outside into a narrow cloister bathed in moonlight. You notice how the shadows play tricks, elongating stone arches and making the world seem both ancient and endlessly mysterious. You begin to think about the candle clock's cultural ripple effect, how an invention meant for monks quietly found its way into the broader tapestry of medieval life. Though the candle clock was born in the monastic hush, its concept inspired other innovations in timekeeping and signaling beyond abbey walls. For example, early city watchmen used similar candle-based timers to measure their patrol shifts, a practice that helped maintain order during night hours. Imagine a tired guard relying on a burning candle's steady drip to remind him when to change posts. Interestingly, some medieval festivals incorporated candle clocks into their rituals. Certain religious feasts involved lighting candles that would mark the duration of prayers or celebrations. The slow burning of a candle became a symbolic measure of devotion and communal time. Historians still argue whether these public uses of candle clocks were direct descendants of monastic technology or evolved independently as simple time markers. The evidence is ambiguous, leaving room for exciting debate. A quirky medieval record tells of a noblewoman who had a specially made candle clock with colored wax layers. Each color represented a different household task, so the household staff could know when to switch duties just by the color burning down. This was probably the medieval equivalent of a chore chart, but way more stylish and aromatic. You chuckle, picturing the servants glancing up at a glowing stripe of crimson and rushing to polish silver before it turned to amber. Moreover, the candle clock concept influenced the design of some early mechanical clocks. The idea of marking passing time in measurable increments inspired inventors to move from the unpredictable wax to gears and escapements. The wax served as a kind of natural prototype, imperfect but illuminating. One fascinating scholarly debate centers on whether the candle clock's gradual decline was due more to technological advancements or to changing social needs. As urban life grew more complex, the demand for precise timekeeping intensified, making the candle's gentle rhythm less practical. Yet, the candle clock's charm never fully faded. Even after mechanical clocks became widespread, candles remained a comforting companion, whether for light, ritual, or nostalgia. You imagine the quiet glow of candlelight in a bustling city, a soft rebellion against the cold precision of machinery. As you wander back toward the abbey's heart, the mingling scents of beeswax and stone feel timeless, a sensory link between past and present. You realize that the candle clock wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol of how humans have always tried to harness the flow of time, blending the practical with the poetic. And somewhere in that slow melt of wax and flicker of flame lies a message, that time, no matter how measured, is ultimately a shared experience, glowing softly in the dark. You find yourself wandering toward the abbey's garden, where the cool night air mingles with the scent of damp earth and blooming herbs. It's a perfect place to reflect on how the monks' candle clocks fit within the broader medieval understanding of time, not just as a measurement but as a lived experience. In the Middle Ages, time wasn't simply counted, it was felt. The passing hours were tied to the natural world, the rising and setting sun, the movement of stars, the growth of plants. Monks lived in harmony with these rhythms, and their candle clocks were an extension of that harmony. Here's a mainstream historical fact: the medieval concept of canonical hours divided the day into segments for prayer and work. Candle clocks helped mark these hours during darkness, linking spiritual life to temporal flow. But there's a quirky detail you might not know: the candles were sometimes scented with different herbs for each canonical hour, so the smell changed as the night progressed. Imagine waking up not just to a bell but to the scent of lavender, rosemary, or frankincense guiding you through your prayers. Historians still argue whether this sensory layering was widespread or limited to certain monasteries with access to exotic herbs and trade routes. Either way, it adds a fascinating layer to the candle clock's role as more than just a timer. You close your eyes and try to imagine the night shift. A monk wakes as the lavender-scented candle reaches its pin, the bell rings softly, and he moves to the chapel to recite the nocturnes. Time here is both measured and experienced, a tapestry woven of light, scent, and sound. The garden around you feels like a metaphor for this layered experience. Different plants bloom and fade in cycles, their scents and colors marking time's passage in ways no clock can capture. You recall an odd medieval belief, that the flame's color and behavior could predict weather or spiritual events. A flickering blue flame might foretell rain, a steady yellow one promised peace. Candle clocks, then, were also windows into nature's subtle signs. It's easy to see how this blending of the practical and mystical made candle clocks uniquely suited for monastic life. Beyond monasteries, the idea of time as a multisensory experience slowly faded as mechanical clocks took over, marking a shift toward precision and uniformity. But for those monks, the candle clock was a faithful companion, a glowing bridge between earthly routine and divine rhythm. You breathe deeply, the cool night air mingling with imagined scents of wax and herbs, feeling the slow pulse of time as it once was. The candle burns low, the garden whispers its secrets, and you sense the subtle power of those flickering flames, still casting shadows across the centuries. The moon hangs high as you stroll toward the abbey's old workshop, where tools and materials hint at the quiet craft of medieval inventors. You can almost hear the faint scratch of quills and the soft scrape of knives shaping wax. It's here that the candle clock's story intersects with human creativity, trial, and error. One key fact to remember: while candle clocks seem simple, their construction required a surprising level of skill. Carving evenly spaced notches, embedding tiny pins, and attaching bells that wouldn't break the fragile wax took patience and precision. You think of the craftsmen, often monks themselves, who honed these delicate skills, blending artistry and practicality. Their work was a slow dance between science and devotion, balancing functional accuracy with the limitations of materials. Here's a quirky detail: some candle clocks incorporated small weights or counterbalances inside the wax to control the burn rate. These tiny embedded curiosities made each candle unique, almost like medieval custom watches. Historians still debate the extent to which these innovations were systematic or improvised. Was there a tradition of candle clock making passed down through generations, or did individual monasteries experiment independently? The evidence is tantalizing but inconclusive. You picture a monk carefully embedding a tiny metal bead inside the wax, whispering a prayer for the flame's steady burn, both science and superstition mingling in one act. Mechanical clocks were already emerging by this time, but candle clocks persisted because of their quiet simplicity and spiritual resonance. Unlike noisy gears, the candle's gentle glow and soft bell were less disruptive to contemplation. Some monks even decorated their candles with religious symbols, adding another layer of meaning to the passage of time. Burning a candle wasn't just measuring hours, it was an act of faith. Outside the monastery, wealthy patrons sometimes commissioned elaborate candle clocks as status symbols, adorned with precious metals or intricate carvings. Owning such a candle clock was a way to display piety and sophistication. You imagine a nobleman carefully lighting his ornate candle clock before retiring, comforted by its glow and the gentle reminder of the monk's dedication. The candle clock's slow, quiet burn stood in stark contrast to the growing mechanical world beyond the abbey walls, a reminder that technology need not always shout to be effective. As you close the workshop door behind you, you carry a newfound respect for the humble candle and the human hands that crafted it, fragile yet resilient, ephemeral yet enduring. The flicker of wax and light continues to mark time not just in hours, but in the stories and lives it quietly touched. You make your way back through the quiet corridors of the abbey, the soft glow of a single candle lighting your path. The journey through the history of candle clocks has brought you to a deeper understanding, not just of an ancient timekeeping device, but of a way of life shaped by light, shadow, and the relentless passage of time. The candle clock, with its humble flicker and gentle chime, was more than a practical invention. It was a symbol of human ingenuity, devotion, and the desire to bring order to the mystery of night. Through centuries of monastic use, trial and error, and quiet innovation, this simple device helped structure the spiritual rhythm of medieval life. One last historical fact: by the late Middle Ages, candle clocks were gradually replaced by mechanical clocks, which offered greater precision. Yet the candle clock's influence lingered, its principles echoed in later horological developments. There's a quirky final note: some monks believed that as the candle burned down, it carried prayers upward, making the candle a spiritual conduit as well as a timekeeper. This belief added an almost mystical dimension to an otherwise practical tool. Historians still argue whether this spiritual significance influenced the candle clock's design more than practical needs. Was the bell's gentle toll simply an alarm, or a call to communion with the divine? As you settle down, the candle's flame slowly dwindling beside you, you feel the quiet power of this ancient technology. It reminds you that even the simplest inventions carry stories, emotions, and human hopes within their glow. And as the flame softens to a final flicker, you close your eyes, feeling time itself ease into a slow, gentle rhythm, one measured by light, sound, and the steady melting of wax. Now, take a deep breath. Let the softness of this story lull you toward sleep. The night is yours to keep, held in the calm embrace of history's quiet flames. The candle's last glow fades into a gentle darkness, a slow retreat of warmth and light that mirrors your own journey from wakefulness to rest. Imagine the soft crackle of wax melting, the faint ringing of a tiny bell echoing in a vast, quiet abbey, sounds that are at once ancient and soothing. As your breathing slows, think of those medieval monks, cloaked in silence and candlelight, marking the passing hours with patience and prayer. They remind us that time is not just a relentless march forward but a series of moments to be felt, appreciated, and honored. The flickering flame was their companion in the long night, a guide through darkness both literal and metaphorical. Its steady burn offered structure, comfort, and a humble reminder that light always follows shadow. Now, you can let your mind wander among those waxen lights, those quiet bells, and the slow, sure passage of time. You might imagine the warm scent of beeswax, the cool touch of stone walls, or the distant murmur of a midnight prayer. In this calm, you find peace, a gentle invitation to let go of the day's noise and step softly into sleep. The candle clock story ends here, but its glow lingers, a warm ember in the hearth of your mind. Good night. Rest well, and may your dreams drift gently on the quiet currents of time.